In this segment, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Liturgy of Holy Week. We start out with Palm Sunday, when we have a procession, the blessing of the palms, usually outside the church, and a procession with the palms into church, reenacting what happened with Jesus as he entered Jerusalem. And it's interesting that in Holy Week, we have a few processions. We'll have one on Holy Thursday as well. We'll have the procession to adore the cross on Good Friday. And then we'll also have the procession from the Blessed Fire on Holy Saturday Vigil. So we have to remember that processions are a way of praying with our feet. Now, on Palm Sunday, we bless the palms, and then we hear the beautiful Passion narrative of the gospel we're using this year, which is Luke. And remember, Luke has certain attributes that we hear that are different from the other Passion narratives. You can hear about it in the other section that I did on the readings of Holy Week. Well, the next important moment is the Chrism Mass. Now, in theory, the Chrism Mass should take place on Holy Thursday morning. It involves the bishop and as many priests of the diocese as possible. And it's at the point at which the holy oils used throughout the year are blessed, especially the oil for the sick and the oil for catechumens. Whereas the chrism oil is not blessed, it's consecrated. Chrism oil is used in baptism, confirmation, ordination, those very special moments in which we call God's blessing upon us in a special way. Now, in a lot of dioceses, it doesn't take place on Holy Thursday morning because the evening liturgy is very busy and a lot of priests really cannot make it to the cathedral for this. So in a lot of dioceses, they move it either to Monday or Tuesday of Holy Week. Thursday evening, we have the commemoration of the Lord's Supper. And at that commemoration, we're remembering the fact that Jesus, at the Last Supper, washed the feet of the disciples. In fact, the priest will wash the feet of some volunteers in the community as a sign of service, reminding ourselves that the Eucharist is the body of Christ, but it's also Christ who came to serve us. And we also have to remember that this humble act, usually an action performed by a slave, is not an act of denying the divinity of Jesus. Rather, it reveals the divinity of Jesus. Because we hear in John's writings, God is love. God came to love us, and this is a very physical sign of that love, washing our feet. Now, one thing you might also notice is that Peter objects. He doesn't want his feet washed, and Jesus says it has to happen. Why does Peter object? Because he doesn't want to be served. Very often we would much rather volunteer than ask for help. And this is an example where we learn that sometimes asking for help is even an action of service. Because by asking for help, we're giving others the opportunity to show charity towards us. And that's a gift to them. Now, at the end of the Holy Thursday service, the altar is emptied and the Holy Eucharist is taken to a site of reposition. This is another one of those processions where it will be held until Holy Saturday night. On Good Friday, we don't have the Eucharist, at least as celebration of the Mass. We have a commemoration of the Passion of the Lord. Now, this includes a part which has readings, including the Passion of John. Unlike Palm Sunday, where they alternate the years, one year it's Mark, one Matthew, one Luke. Every year we have the Passion of John. And again, when John writes his Passion, he has certain things that he pushes. You can listen to that in the other segment that I did on the readings of Holy Week. So we begin the liturgy with the Passion, and that's followed by 10 intercessions, solemn intercessions, praying for the church, praying for the world, praying for believers, even praying for non-believers, and then events in the world, those who travel, for those who are bothered by storms, etc. After that, we have another part of the liturgy calling the called the veneration of the cross. The cross is brought into the church, and it's slowly unveiled, and people come up and they kiss the cross in some way, venerating the fact that Jesus gave his life on that cross out of love for us. And then finally, we have a short procession bringing the Eucharist out from the altar where it's been placed. We have the reception of the Eucharist, although we did not have consecration. This is Eucharist that was consecrated at the Last Supper, and then we're dismissed. And one of the elements of Good Friday is the silence, the simplicity of the liturgy. When the priest and the servers enter the church, they don't even have a song, they don't have an entrance rite. They simply enter and then kneel down in prostration. And that spirit of simplicity continues all throughout that liturgy. There is no liturgy on Saturday morning. The next time we come for liturgy will be Saturday night. And if you've ever entered the church on Saturday morning, there's a feeling of emptiness. It's almost like what we feel when somebody in our family dies. You look up and the tabernacle's open. No one's home. And that's a good thing to feel, the difference, the emptiness of having lost Jesus, who is the one who truly loves us. Now, in a lot of churches, they also have a blessing of the Easter basket or the Easter breakfast. This is a sign that even though things are not right, they soon will be. And then finally, we have the Easter Vigil. Now, the Easter Vigil starts out outside again with the Easter fire and the blessing of the Paschal candle. We're processed into church, and there's a beautiful hymn called the Exultet, in which we celebrate the light that is brought into the world. We celebrate that we're no longer living in darkness. We celebrate the redemption that we've witnessed in these days. After the Exultet, we have a whole series of readings, possibly up to 7 readings, talking about salvation history. We have the Gloria again. Today, finally, after many weeks, we hear the Gloria, we hear the Alleluia. And then we have an account of the Gospel. After the Gospel, if we have OCI members, if we have babies being baptized, we bless the baptismal font, and we baptize those people. And we also have a renewal of our baptismal promises. And then we go on through Mass as normal until the very end of Mass, when we hear a dismissal, which again includes the Alleluia. All throughout Easter and Easter season, we're going to be hearing the various accounts of the resurrection. And if you listen carefully, you'll notice that there's subtle differences in the 4 accounts. Some people are horrified by that because they say, wait a minute, this is the most important moment of our salvation. How is it that the disciples heard a different version? But I heard a great explanation for this. If you had 4 witnesses at a trial and they said the exact same thing in terms of witnessing what happened, what would you think? That it was practiced, that it was just rehearsed. But if you have 4 different versions, slightly different, then you believe that these are eyewitnesses. And that's exactly what we have with the 4 accounts. For example, in John's Gospel, there's 1 moment, in Matthew, there's 2, in Mark, there's 3, and in Luke, the whole Lady Sodality. And so we have these slight differences. Each has its own way of saying things, but they all tell the basic story. Women went to the tomb early on Easter morning. The tomb was empty. Jesus rose, and he appeared to the disciples. Think of it, folks. Would the disciples have gone out preaching the good news? Would they have risked their lives if they hadn't seen the risen Jesus? And for me, even the more telling point, when they told their stories and it got written down in the Gospels, they don't come across as heroes. A couple of them come across as dummies, and yet they shared that news. If they wanted to make something up, they would have made themselves superheroes. So all these little facts, even though they can't prove the resurrection, they give a certainty in our hearts that Jesus rose. And that's something we celebrate throughout this Triduum. Now, Triduum begins on the vigil, on the Lord's Supper, and it ends with the Vigil Mass. And one thing we should remember, these technically are not 3 different days. In the Triduum, for just a few days, we enter into eternity. This is all one event. It's very much like when we celebrate Mass. When we celebrate Mass, we're not in Baltimore at noon. We're at the Last Supper. We're standing under the cross. We're at the empty tomb, encountering Jesus risen. And that's a good thing to remember, because just for those moments of the Mass, we're touching eternity. And there's a symbol of that in the Gospels when Jesus dies. Remember how the veil of the temple splits and the Holy of Holies is exposed. Before this, the holiness of God was sequestered in that room. From now on, we have access to the holiness of God, and the holiness of God comes crashing out into the world. Everything we witness, if we witness with the eyes of faith, can be considered holy. And may God bless us.